Welcome to Season 4 of the K4 Business Podcast.
Question for the audience. How do you turn life's unexpected detours into a story and a business that truly moves people? That's what our guest will explore in this episode. She'll share how being persistent and adaptable helped her turn personal challenges into purpose, and how those same skills can help you write your next chapter, literally and figuratively. If you've ever wondered how to transform your experiences into impact, or finally publish that book you've been sitting on, tune in and walk alongside our guest, who will show you every step, even the uneven ones, can lead to something more meaningful. Our guest today is Marjorie Turner Hollman. She's the founder of Marjorie Turner LLC and helps aspiring authors bring their nonfiction stories to life through self-publishing. Since 2012, she's guided writers from concept to completion, offering expert coaching, editing, book and cover design, and print-on-demand support. A Florida native who came north for college and discovered both snow and storytelling, Marjorie's personal journey includes a season when she was unable to walk. Today, she uses hiking poles to explore and write trail guides that inspire others to enjoy what she calls easy walks. Her work blends resilience, creativity, and a deep belief that every story deserves to find its path into the world. Marjorie, absolute pleasure to have you here. Do you have a favorite quote or saying?
My goodness. Boy, one of the things I find myself is saying is people will say, well, it's not very much. And I respond saying, you may think it's not very much. For the person that you did this for, it was a lot. It may not seem like much, but it made the difference.
Wow. So personal challenges into creative inspiration. There's a bit of a story in there. What was the my goodness to let's work this through? What's that story?
I was a reluctant writer. I help writers now, but I was one that had that editor on the shoulder, probably sounded a little like my mom. Just said, oh, I don't know grammar. I flunked grammar in high school, and it just, I'd rather be a storyteller and do oral like we're doing now than have to write and figure out semicolons and all of that stuff. I became quite ill in my mid-30s, single mother with 2 kids, and found myself with brain surgery that it saved my life, but left my right side totally paralyzed. I was no longer able to do the doing, have recovered quite a lot, and still live with consequences of that. What I could do when I was homebound, saw that I had very few choices, was I had a computer, we had email back in those days that we remember when it was exciting to get 1 or 2 emails in a day. Remember that for some of us? I know,
And now we get spam.
I know. And I started writing stories just about my kids and their antics, and also about healing and learning to figure out living with a changed life. And that's where my writing got started.
You had this eminent brain surgery, and I assume some dread going in. And
Sure.
then you had the surgery and you found out there were consequences. You had a legitimate right to suck your thumb and pout. The question I have is, what made you say, okay, enough of that, let's move on? Some people want to stay victims, and they do successfully. What made you not do that? Tell me that story.
My kids. Full stop. I wasn't happy. I was not grateful that I had survived. It was really daunting. I knew that it wasn't going to be a crisis that just got fixed. I could tell that I was going to need support for a long time. That was a really scary thing for me to face, because asking for help was a really difficult thing. I was very proud that I was taking care of my family. And suddenly I was faced with the reality that I needed a tremendous amount of help. Lots of people step forward in crises. Many fewer are able to be there for you for the long haul. And that was very, very daunting for me. So I started learning how to ask for help, one person at a time, but learning a skill to spread your net wide and not make it so that one particular person felt like they had to fix everything, because nobody can.
So the mobility and your easy walks. So you've transitioned from hi, I'm kind of parked and I can't really move the way I used to now you're writing trail guides. I like that. That is quite the transition. A lot of people say getting out in the outdoors is healing, et cetera, but obviously it is because you're the proof in the pudding. What made that happen? How did you go? You know what? Yes, and it reinforced in the yes of doing that.
It did not happen overnight. Anybody with neurological challenges of any kind know that it's not just trying. It's not just no pain, no gain. It's actually really untrue. And you've got pain, especially with mobility, especially with neurological stuff. A lot of it is waiting to see what your body will do and what you can do. But if you just sit in your chair and wait without doing anything, healing may occur and you might not even notice. So as long as you're doing what you're able to, when you're able to, how you're able to, if and when healing occurs, you're in a better position to actually understand that it's happened and move forward, possibly create more healing. There's no guarantees. Neurological stuff is pretty mind bending, as it were. Terms that, there were things happening in my body I had no words for. And wonderful authors like Oliver Sacks gave me words through his books and helped me recognize healing that might occur and recognize when it was happening. A lot of that happened on daily walks with support down along the lake that was just down below my house. And for about 7 years, that's about where I walked, was along the lake through all the seasons, seeing what was there, seeing the seasonal birds migrating through, seeing the changes of seasons. And those were things that I wrote about. And that was all part of healing, was meditations, what turned into liturgies for my Liturgies of Easy Walks memoir.
It won't be this question, but down the road, I'm going to come back to that word liturgy. That is the word that has a lot of its own baggage, but not right here. This
You're
question
right.
I'm really intrigued with. You're an author. You're excited about it. You've maybe even got some success. And then somebody comes to you, or a few somebody's come to you and say, I need your help. Please help me, Marjorie. What turned on the switch that said there's a business here? That really interests my listeners.
Absolutely. First, got the interviewing skills and the writing skills through a very local newspaper editor. I approached her actually for something completely different. I was doing a volunteer work for a community organization, and called her up and said, can you put in an ad for our community organization? She took the time to talk to me, and by the end of the conversation, we had agreed that I would try writing for her newspaper. That began a 25-year plus continuing relationship, mentorship, mentoring, back and forth at this writing and learning and practicing. And so, would you call that a business? I think it was business training, at least for me. What she tells me is I'm the only person who ever pitched her ideas for more. And of all of her writers, I just kept saying, this feels good. I think this is a door that I could do more. Let me come up with some more ideas rather than passively wait to get asked to do something. And what she says is her other writers never did that. I would say it's because there was joy in what I did. Really loved the people that I was meeting in the community. And it was really fun seeing my stories in print every month. As part of that, I just kept looking for opportunities. I call it pushing on a door and seeing if it opens. And some of them do, some of them don't. And then you go look for another door. One point, I listened to, I your kind of resources. I do more reading podcasts, but I
Shame on you.
attention.
Stop it.
I know I can read faster than I can listen. And I subscribe to a lot of newsletters, and I encourage people to do that. There's a lot of wisdom out there. And one person I give huge credit to, Ed Gandia, has a newsletter that works with copywriters and people writing professionally, freelance writers. And he had a podcast before there were podcasts, and the topic was out of the box jobs for story for story. One of the ones in that webinar was about being a personal historian, helping families get their stories written self. That opened the door to self-publishing with mentors. I found a whole community of personal historians who mentored me, helped me learn the tools of self-publishing from 13 years ago. It's changed quite a bit, but the basics were there. I was generously mentored by multiple professionals, and I feel very indebted. There was a Association of Personal Historians, which no longer exists, but those relationships with other personal historians across the world, actually. Jennifer Campbell's in Canada. She has a book on on starting a personal history book. Business. These people were amazing, very, very generous, and they continue to be generous. That opened the door. I already had this interviewing skill, but I didn't have the self-publishing skills, had the writing skills, but I had to go from being a newspaper writer in third person, he said, she said, they said, to first person. This happened to me. I did this. It wasn't as hard a transition as I thought, but that was because I'd already done the work.
Yeah. I find it fascinating. You've gone from things aren't going well to healing to writing, and then you have in publishing into that piece. I know you focus on nonfiction, and so you're building that out. When you're engaging these people, are they themselves, have they hit it into a roadblock, or is it where you're interviewing them and you find out, listen, what brought you here? And of course, maybe they stubbed their toe, figuratively speaking, going one path and now they're on a new path. And you're just saying hi. You bring that out in their story, and then like how what does that package look like? Someone says, Marjorie, I'm here. What happens next?
A really interesting question, because in fact, what you were saying about roadblocks, very often what brings people to me is roadblocks that either they know that their story needs something, they've written something, and they sense that there's something missing. And that's a lot of my development editing, is saying, let's look at the big picture. What are the things that aren't there? And that's not always easy to see what isn't there. You have to understand what should be there and see the gaps. And that's something I evidently am pretty good at. So yes, roadblocks that people find or get referred to me, or conversations where I ask people, what have you done? What are you doing? What are you interested in doing? Or just plain, have you written a book? Have you ever of written a book? And I see that look on people's face of, that never occurred to me. And then I'll follow up with some other questions, and they'll say, I actually do have ideas, skills, life lessons that I'd like to pass on. And I can say, I can help you with that. And they say yes or no, or maybe later. They're all conversations. So yes, roadblocks are a really important thing, and looking for help, understanding that none of us have all the skills that we need to accomplish what we hope to. And there are other people out there, and sometimes it takes quite a bit of effort to find them. Sometimes serendipity, they fall in your lap, and That's the really fun parts.
They say the old idiom is you can't tell a book by its cover. But the interesting thing is the truer version is you won't buy a book without a cover. Tell me about cover making and how important it is to the process and how you've fallen into delivering that skill.
I would not say that I'm a cover design expert at all. I do recognize different factors in it. I actually have a cover designer that I work. She's actually also the editor that mentored me. She does book design and cover design started as her newspaper layout. So she's been doing that for 30 years. So covers, yes, they are important. And your point of unless somebody's really recommended it and they say, I don't care what the cover looks like. But as far as just browsing the library, even just looking at those spines, the color really jump out at you. And when you pull that off the library shelf or you see the cover on the Amazon thumbnail, you need to be able to read it. So the print needs to be big enough. It needs to be clear enough. It needs to give you the promise. What is this book going to give? What's the difference going to be to me? Fiction is different. I read lots of fiction. I've actually just contracted to do a cozy mystery and we'll work on getting the cover. I enjoy mysteries. That's just but it'll be fun to edit this for a friend of mine. Covers, yeah, that's, I have another cover designer I work Trail Books. She is a genius with Photoshop and the cover with my Liturgy of Easy Walks memoir. There was a telephone pole right in the middle of the path, and she magically erased the telephone pole and made it just what I was hoping to be. So some of it is getting a hold of a good cover designer, someone who knows the technical tools, but also whatever your genre is it a straight business book? Is it a self-help? Is it a fiction book in mystery or sci-fi or dystopian or children's books? Those all have different characteristics that tell you this is what I am before you even open a page.
So you have a story that evolves, and you touched on mystery, and I could see that happening because every once in a while, everybody likes a good mystery on TV. Sometimes people like to have a sound bite, that brings you to the book, right? When a book is crafted, do you take components of that book and have someone either read it, or do you how do you end up bringing it from paper to the social media platforms that draw interest in, or if it's informational, right? How do you share that information and going, hi, here's a tidbit of knowledge. I can fire hose you. You can read it in the book at your own pace, or here's a snippet. Every once in a while I'm fascinated on Instagram, you'll get a little tidbit here, back in history. Here's an element, and you give you a little bit of context. There's a professor who does that, and he's out of the US. He talks about, things happening in Persia, kind of an evolutionary steps. Is that something that you also encourage the authors to do?
I work with the author to do that. My skill is in big picture. And when you got big picture, you actually have to get that down to sound bites, as it were. And a lot of authors, they're too close to their work. So as someone who's worked with the author, I've read the books. I've done the developmental edit. I know the story. I also know what is, for me, the one or two big things that what's the why? What's going to gain from that? I had an author that it was a memoir, but it was based on genealogy that she had from 1500s France who came to New France in Nova Scotia and made it. There was so much she couldn't know. She had the genealogy all the way up to present day with my migration to the US from Nova Scotia. They were part of um, the Acadian dispersed. But she had very little real information other than the facts. And she turned those longings to know more into letters that she wrote to her ancestors all through the book. And they became a thread along with her Sinchafleshe that was the wrapped around the fur traders that was passed down. And it was a remarkable story. She needed a lot of help with the writing of it, but the story was there. And I was absolutely captivated with those letters, unanswerable letters. The genealogist that ran into those brick walls, Paula Grand Prix is her name. She's the author. And she, rather than hit those brick walls, wrote letters, unanswerable letters to her ancestors from the 1500s. How did it feel with sitting at the dock watching your family leave for the New World when you were too ill to follow them? How did it feel being on that boat when your mother died on the trip? Just heart-wrenching and survival and thriving in the New World that I found very humbling. And yes, that became a really strong part of what we included in her book description on her Amazon page, which I wrote and she agreed. But I do a lot of that writing with my clients because, again, they're too close. It's kind of like writing your own bio. Very, very difficult to do for yourself. And it really helps to have somebody be able to tell you, this is what you're really good at. And this is what's really interesting in your story. It doesn't feel interesting to us because we've lived it and it's just part of who we are. Other people, real asset in helping you be able to frame those things.
How do you just frame that? The fact that she's writing letters as part of the storyline. How many different styles? So you just open a whole rabbit hole alert. We're going down a rabbit hole. So
Maybe a shallow rabbit hole. We don't have to go too far down.
yeah, no one's chasing us. But you just talked about a style and where it's a communication in the letter format versus Mary showed up here, left this country, then showed up here. Life was hard. That's really like tick 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 tick. If you're gonna sum check it to the smallest possible number of words, taking that into a storytelling. So one style is you can have people having dialogue back and forth. Mary talking about today I wake up, it's like a personal diary or even a letters. I think that's really cool. How many different styles or approaches are there that are potentials?
My goodness, as many as there are people, but yeah, there are formats. And in memoir specifically, there's basically only two. One is like your biographies that you read in elementary school. This person was born, they lived in a log cabin, they grew up, they turned into a lawyer and turned into President Abe Lincoln. Ta-da. And then he died, so and was murdered. It's chronological
Short book, by the way.
Yeah. Topical is your other choice within memoir. These are personal stories, but they're focused on a single or a specific thing. Your story, Wayne, that you did with the coffee, that's topical. I mean, you're talking about your own experiences, but it's focused on a very specific topic. And yes, you were born, you grew up, you progressed to all these different things, all these branching points. That's a whole other way of writing, but those are still topical. If you're going to write about branching point, you're still not covering every in your life. You're curating, you're choosing this, then this, then this. That can be kind of a topical, chronological, but it's making those choices. So how many forms? As many as there are people within the structure of writing, specifically in memoir. There's 2 specifically in business books. Oh my goodness, how many businesses there are. I see them as life lessons learned or skills that people want to learn, or some of them are inspirational. Self-help books are inspirational. They're not typically memoir, but they're all teaching lessons or imparting skills. And then fiction is entertainment on any level. But there's life lessons there too. There's so many times that with fiction, you can write about truth in the ways that just chronological experiences that are also truth don't convey as power as fiction has the power to teach.
I get a kick. I think I've met authors that thought they were E. E. Cummings. I don't need an editor. And they all dread and fear these editors. I don't need punctuation. Here's a question for you. Have you ever got a proof of a book and immediately knew you needed gravel and possibly trauma care, and you had to tell the client, this is not a book, it is an angry word salad?
I do a lot of book reviews for different organizations. Absolutely. There are books that I say they desperately needed an editor. It makes me sad that they already self-publish and didn't get the help that they deserve, because I could see that there's a story and one book that I don't even remember the title at this point. The 9/10 of the book was about education and about how terrible things were for teachers, for support staff. The very last chapter talked about the creative things that she did with the kids in the classroom. And that was her story. But nobody was going to get to the last chapter because of the anger and the frustration and the rant about how horrible education is, that they weren't going to get to what was good and what she had to teach. I was really sad about that because it was a lost opportunity. And I have other books that many books that I read are wonderful. And when I start seeing that people use curb instead of curve, and they're almost there, but the words are wrong. They using the word that would make sense. And it makes me really sad that they weren't able to get the help they needed before they hit publish. I see those as missed opportunities. Editors, in my experience, want to make you look better, want to make you look your best. And as opposed to, oh no, it's good enough. It is not trying to tear you down. It's trying to build you up and make it so what you have to share is clear, unconfusing, and really gets the message across that you have inside you, and is trying to get out. There's a lot of roadblocks. I describe people who write as you're trying to make something that's 2-dimensional on a page into 3-dimensional life. And it's like a magic trick, because life is 3-dimensional. Writing is only 2, but you're trying to make it feel like 3-dimensional. And their tricks don't show if you do it well.
So I love people with integrity, especially when they don't tell me, they show me. And I love people who know what they aren't as well as what they are. And technically, I can actually produce an ISBN, so I must be a publisher. Why did you not choose that moniker? No one could know what you were white labeling. Why did you choose not to be a self-help consultant instead of a publisher?
Why did I choose to be a consultant as opposed to publisher? Very, very simple. Royalties. It's a book accounting nightmare. You've got literary legacies you have to maintain and press on. You've got accounting nightmares that you have to manage. And I didn't want to do that. I know the work it is for my own books. Honestly, I didn't want to take on that infrastructure. It's especially with self-publishing, it's really very, very straightforward to create your own account and it's your own royalties. It's your bank account. It goes straight into your bank for any book sales. You're motivated. I see myself as support, not as a conglomerate that has multiple authors and has life and legacy connections that is really daunting, and I didn't think was in the best interest of me and my family, nor of the authors that I work with.
When you're having an author rolls in and says, "Hi, I've got a book," it could be the passage of someone migrating from Europe to North America. Good story, 1500s. It's a period piece. How do you help the author? Because they have a story. There's passion, right? There's some juice in behind it. There's some fire in the belly of the dragon. How do you make sure that it's going to land well? And I mean that as in there's an audience for it, or is this an audience that might mature into it? Like if I'm writing a kid's book, my target audience isn't going to be a 30-year-old in business, who's looking for, how do I work the markets or whatever that is, or someone who's looking for an escape from working the markets, right? So that you have the romance novels, etc. How do you know that there's someone that wants to read this? And then how do you shape that content so to make sure that the story gets told? It's there's it's almost forecasting. This is going to work well because I've seen it. I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to let you fill the blanks in now.
I'm a reader and I enjoy good books. I love when I get to see a manuscript and say, this has promise. And the reason it has promise for me is because there's something I want to learn more about. And typically what I will see is the story is buried under other stuff that you need to, I don't want to compare myself to a sculpture, but it's the block of marble that you have to keep chipping away. I can see it. And that's because there is a core of interest. I came across a book recently that I declined to work with. And I just said, I don't think I can add anything to this. Maybe there's an audience. I can't see it. It's if there was the story, it's not for me. Maybe I'm sure somebody else will work on it. But if I don't see the value, if I don't see this is really cool, or this really people need to hear this story. That's how I felt with Paula's book was, I'd worked with a lot of memoir and memoir, maybe the audience is your family. And that's absolutely wonderful because we all hunger for connection. And those personal memoirs tell the story of your family. That's the key, is you're unlocking the past for your family. They don't know, even just one or two generations back. They don't know what you know. I love working with people who are still here, have those memories, and can preserve them for the children, grandchildren, those that go in the future. Those, no matter what, I see value. For the books that people hope they can sell, it's trickier because you've got a different, it's not just your mother saying, oh, that's a wonderful story, honey. If people are going to spend money, it needs to give value. And if you don't see value, maybe some people will. I'm not the final word. But if I can't see the value, there's other people that should work on the story. So I have to see that we can get this into a valuable book that has something to give to somebody, somebody's. Some books have huge audience. Some have much smaller, very distinct audiences. That doesn't mean they shouldn't be heard. It means that they're for everybody. Any book. No book is for everybody. Does that answer a little of your question?
It answers a lot of the question. Thank you.
Looking back, Mom says she begrudged buying those 500 books. And I autographed every single one. But I do have a question for you as a fellow, I'm a 60-something. I'll let you fill in the blanks as you find. 20-somethings love to say things like, the book is dead. And clearly that is proved not right. Why do you think that something has lived longer than it was told it was going to?
Specifically with books, or are you
Yeah.
thinking other things? Yeah, my own experience tells me that when I'm reading, whether it's on a screen, and again, whether people are talking about a physical book that you're holding or a digital book, at least for me, and again, this is more fiction and nonfiction, reading a book when you get into a story takes you to another world. It transports you. I don't travel easily. My husband has made it so we do travel, and we have come to Canada multiple times. We love to go to Canada. We've mostly been in the east part to Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Quebec, to Newfoundland, which is our favorite so far. So, but travel is not easy for me. And when I pick up a book that takes me to the past, historical fiction, other kinds of fiction that are just, it's time travel. I'm sitting in my living room in my cozy chair and back in New York City into New France. I'm into other worlds. And I body can handle that because I'm not physically going there. It's in my mind. And it's hard to go to bed sometimes because I'm so far into that world. So for the draw of book that, yes, movies can do that, but they're very different dynamic. The book, it's all in your imagination, and your imagination can take you anywhere.
Something I've asked before, but I'll ask a little more directly. People, as soon as they knew you were an author, glommed onto you. Could you help? Could you help? Could you help? Tell me about that first person when you said, well, I really don't have time. And they said, I will pay you. I will give you money. Tell me about that flip switch.
Let's see. It's a little complicated because let's see. I first thought of as you were asking that question, but it isn't exactly the way you were describing. My sister introduced me to a person that she knew had a book, and the person said, I know something's missing. So we just had a Zoom call and we talked, and I was interested in her story. I didn't see the story because she hadn't sent me the manuscript. And at that point, nobody had ever I'd never charged anybody for the editing. I'd charged people for doing personal histories. But she had this memoir, but a very topical memoir about running for political office. She was actually a state rep in Massachusetts. And I said, well, I'm always interested in politics, people, public service. And so I said, well, why don't you just send it to me and let me read it? And I can give you some feedback and see what I tell. So she sent me the manuscript, and I started seeing things that were missing. And I basically just had another conversation, said, well, you talked about you were engaged, but then you married somebody else. What happened to the poor guy that you dumped? You never told us about. And we're all going to be saying, wait a minute, what about this poor fiance that just disappeared? And she said, oh, okay, I can. And so that's when she said, I need to work with you. I said, sure. And that was my first book coaching client. And we ended up making it a book that I'm really proud of. And part of it was saying, you've got wonderfully important, here's how you run for office. Here's how you get the signatures. Here's where you stand to find signatures. We need to put that all in an appendix because you've got a narrative. And every time you get us into these technical things, it takes us out of the story because we want to know the why. Why did you choose to run for office? Why did you choose public service as something you did for 10 years and really worked hard? And why did you leave public service? You did. What's that story? All those technical things that some of us do want to know aren't going to get that story, and it's going to dilute the story and make it so we're going to get the story because it's all mixed. So parsing that, what's the technical stuff that people, real nerds, are going to go right to the appendix, and what's the stuff that's the story that the reader can say, you know, I could do that. I should do that. Desperately needed right now. It's people that really understand public service as opposed to self-service. Public service announcement done. Desperately needed.
If someone is coming up and saying, listen, I want to write a book, or I'm in the process of writing a book, or I've created a book and I need someone to edit it, and publishing their artwork and the whole 9 yards, what should they budget for? Like, how do they, is it by word, by page? Is it by, listen, I really write poorly and I need someone to give it a lot of TLC to bring it, to get it, some more oomph? Or I write in a very, some people are great if they're going to write a manual, right?
Right.
Insert A into B to get C.
That's called technical writing.
Well, yeah. Well, it depends on the need, right? What's driving the audience? If I need to know how to repair something, I don't want to feel something. I need to know how to do it fast and quick, so to speak.
Exactly.
But how do you get them from going, listen, your project is, here's your material, whether you started it or not, to coming out the other side of the fence?
Sure.
What's that budget look like?
I'll try to talk about budget, but let me talk about scope first, because there's a lot that people can do for themselves if they're willing to do that work. A lot of it is, there's books out there that tell you how to get to self-published. The bigger challenge I find is when people come to me with manuscript. I actually really like working with writers as opposed to people that want me to do all the writing. Actually much more costly because it is incredibly time consuming and energy consuming, doing the interviews, doing the transcription, doing the transformation into readable narrative that then gets edited, then gets book layout, and then turns into. Those can be $20,000, $30,000. And those are the cheap ones. For people who want to do the writing and come to me and say, I've done this writing, what is it going to cost? And I say, have to see the manuscript because that allows me to judge how developed your writing is, how much work it needs. And so I charge for that. I charge $600 or $700 depending on how big the manuscript originally is, just to evaluate it. Because me, I can't give you a fair price if I haven't taken the, I don't, depends again how long it takes to read, but I don't do any editing then. I strictly provide you with an evaluation. Here's a page letter. Here's what I see. Here's what you have. Here's what you're missing. Here's the level of writing needed. Here's where you are. and here's what's going to be the level of effort. And then they may say, I'll be able to do the book design. I've got someone who already does that. Great. Financially, I'm out of it. It's going to be the developmental editing and possibly the copy editing. Every project is different. If it's a soup to nuts, when you've done the writing, $10,000 to $15,000 isn't an unreasonable price for all the work that I have to pay contractors for the things that I don't do myself. So no, it's not. There are things you can do for yourself. You can go online and find editors that will do things for minuscule amounts, and the quality is all over the place. You might be lucky. You might end up spending money that is down the drain. And I hate to hear people that invest a lot of money with a company that says, we'll get your book published. And either they don't follow through, or that editor or that company takes over their voice and the book loses their voice. And that's, from my personal history work, I've learned to be conduit of people's voices. And that's part of the editing, is don't destroy the voice of the writer. Preserve it, even though you've massaged it. I did. First personal history was my dad. I'm so grateful we got that done before he died. Very close, but we got it done, and he was able to hold the book. But he was never terribly articulate. And so I had to really work hard to get him to clarify as much as he could, and more phone calls and more, Dad, this doesn't make sense. Sometimes he finally just said, well, he was in World War II, and he said, well, it was the war. How did he start out in the Air Force getting on a train and got off the train and he was in the Army? Dad, how did that happen? And he finally just said, it was war. I really don't know. And so there's those. But what I did do was make it so his story was articulate. And my sister captured it best, I think, because when she read it, she said, that sounds just like Dad, but a whole lot clearer. Just so that, I think, is part of what I bring value, is preserving the author's voice, even when it needs a tremendous amount of editing. The author's voice is really precious and inviolable. You want to keep it no matter what.
You are looking at not having 30 years left in your career, probably. You would like what you've done to continue on in some form after you want to not do it 30 hours a week. What could you do to implement, or is it just literally one day you just put up a website that says closed? How do you make your brand outlive you, if you could?
Yeah, that is a really good question. I don't want to see my website shut down. I understand I have a very limited, none of us, last I've checked, none of us get out of this alive. And I do feel like the work that I've done, specifically in my Easy Walks work, as much as travel is hard for me, I do travel locally quite a bit with support. And like I was saying, of coming to Canada, but also to the American West, to Utah and Colorado, and down south. Some of my grandboys are in Tennessee. So we do travel. And I write travels, at least 500 travel blogs at marjorieturner.com. There's just, I want to see those preserved. I'm actually working with someone to take those blogs and put them onto Google Map and put them at location. So they're like little self-guided tours. That when you're in an area and you see that little bubble and it says you could take a self-guided tour, and here's Marjorie's little write-up for it. That to me is very exciting, because it means that they will continue to be useful. The books that are helping people write, that's their to do. Again, I don't want to be a publisher. So if it's of value to them and they want to continue to market it, to share it, to use it as a market tool, God bless them. That's their journey, not mine. Travel writing, I feel like eventually it's going to become dated. For quite a long time, Mammoth Cave in Kentucky is still going to be Mammoth Cave in Kentucky. And we've been there and I've written about it and I've pictures and, and what else is nearby? Where are the other places that we've been that we love water, rivers, lakes. We were just in the Great Lakes last year and, to Niagara Falls and looking right across the falls to Canada from the US. It's right there. It's just, oh, I know. It's just beautiful. And I read about it, but I also bring in my great-great-grandmother went to Niagara Falls, and I've got information that she wrote letters, and we've got information from her travels. So I weave those in, and those I do want to continue. I do want those to go far beyond me. And so, yes, I've talked to my family about I'd like these to continue. And if you can do it in whatever format, the travel, putting it just into a book, it's kind of all over the place. Maybe I could pick a highlights. My trail books are very location specific. And those people keep improving trails and extending them. That makes it so they're dated and I have to do second and third editions. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what it stirred up for me, Wayne.
Marjorie? Wow, it's a wonderful journey we've kind of gone through. If someone wants to join you on this journey and wants to connect with you, how do they reach you? Tell us a story.
Marjorie is how you reach me. Contact information is right there on the website. And I have gotten emails out of the blue. Phone calls out of the blue. A national television station contacted me and said, it's in the middle of the pandemic and people don't know where to go. Can you help us? Somebody on staff had been following your blogs and said you might be able to help us. You can't make that. And part of that is just being out there, being consistent. And I've been showing up for a long time and people do find me every day. They come to my website, find things that are there. And I'm thrilled with that. So Marjorie Turner is where you find me.
You also have a file that you're sharing with people as part of a takeaway. What's that all about?
It's been a while since I gave it. I think
It's a Google Doc.
I think that's my self-publishing 101 that I share with any of my workshop. I do self-publishing workshops and I put it up on my website and people have put it on their websites as a freebie. Just here's the basics. If you're overwhelmed, start here. If you have more questions, I'm happy to answer.
Marjorie Turner Hollman, I want to say thank you so much for your time today. To my co-host Wayne Pratt, you too. But you, the Knack for Business listeners, we want to thank you for your time. And if you are interested in writing a book and you're looking for an easy, relaxed process, reach out to Marjorie. She'll help bring out the content, bring out the you. Even if you is confusing, she can help bring that out. Not the confusing part, though, right? The story. That's the important part. Patience and persistence, though, are the key elements of this whole edit. The key here is patience and persistence, and will shape how you bring your story forward. And
to reach the podcast hosts, email them at info@creativeinsight.com or by the website creativeinsight.com, spelled KREATIVISIGHT.com. To reach Wayne at his email, wayne@motive8u.ca, that is MOTIVE, the numeral 8 and the letter u.ca, or his website, motive8u.ca. If you would like to be a guest on this podcast and share your knowledge, let us know. We would also appreciate your feedback on the content or format. Check the show notes for more details. For these podcasts, we like to acknowledge the support and thanks to the following people. Carl Richards from Podcast Solutions Made Simple, a renowned podcast expert. Fred Crouch, who is the Property Wizard podcaster, where Bernie is a co-host. Jovan Strika from At Hive, a co-working space that is more than just a space. Then Melanie Weber, Bernie's invaluable business partner, and Wayne Pratt from Motivate You Inc., who serves as both a coach and co-host of these podcasts. Disclaimer. Please note that the Knack4 Business podcast episodes are meant solely for educational and general informational purposes. The information and opinions contained within are not intended to be professional advice on any subject matter. The thoughts, views, and opinions expressed by the participants are their own personal beliefs and do not represent the views of the podcast hosts or any affiliated organizations. It is important to note that this podcast is not a replacement for consulting with certified experts in your area who possess knowledge of your unique situation. The hosts of the podcast, along with any participants or affiliated groups, do not take responsibility for any actions taken or not taken based on the information presented in this episode. It is highly recommended that individuals seek guidance from their own personal advisors in fields such as accounting, law, or other pertinent areas prior to undertaking any actions or making decisions that may impact their financial, legal, or other aspects of life.